I'm Brent Gambill. I'm the Director of Track Communications for NASCAR. I oversee Martinsville Speedway, Richmond Raceway, and Darlington Raceway. I think when the pandemic started, NASCAR was the first team sport to come back. So you saw a lot of the, how can we get a team sport to come back and safely do it? And NASCAR navigated that, from Darlington Raceway being the very first sporting event to come back. And then after that, every time you host a race, you are learning more. You're learning more about processes. You're learning more about protocols. You're learning ways to make sure that we can keep people safe. And just last weekend, I just got back from Richmond Raceway, and in Virginia, there were no races with fans in Richmond last year. And we just hosted, slightly under 30% of capacity of about a 50,000 seat track. And it just says a lot that we couldn't have done that a year ago. Working with the state, getting approvals, going through all those layers, especially with municipalities, to make sure that we do it. So for the fan experience, when they come through, we keep people more separated. You've got, mask, you're supposed to wear a mask when you're entering the facility. You've got hand washing stations throughout. It's all cashless concessions. Things have changed. And I think in a lot of ways, especially those of us like in the media and the communications world where Zoom has become the thing, it really has changed things in some positive ways as well. And I don't think we'll ever look probably at a sporting event the same way we did before the pandemic. Biggest piece of advice I always give everyone is networking. You've got to know people and you've got to be willing to talk to folks. But if you live in a state like I'm from Arkansas, there's no professional sports in Arkansas. There's 2 minor league baseball teams and that's it. So if you really do want to work on in a professional sport somewhere, you've got to be willing to move. You've got to be willing to volunteer. You've got to be willing to do anything it takes to get that job. And, I finished law school and my first job, I was paid with a stipend and I was working for the LA Dodgers, but I would have never gotten that opportunity being from Arkansas if I hadn't networked. You meet somebody and you follow up and that person introduces you to someone else and it just continually went down the path. And the job I got with the Dodgers to start my career in sports, I had never, I'd already been declined. Like they wouldn't even interview me for the job. So it was a big deal at the time to get that opportunity to now get the job and to get an interview. And it took someone within the Dodgers organization calling and asking them to say, hey, you should give this guy an opportunity. And that's how I got it. So it was really networking and then being willing to do anything. So I think it was maybe I took the bar. And then about 3 weeks later, I'm working for the Dodgers and I'm in like a storage closet organizing jerseys. And I can assure you, when you finish law school, that's not the first thing you think you're going to be doing. But I knew to get my foot in the door, that's what I had to do. And that's where you had to go. And from that point forward, once you get your foot in the door, it's all about outworking everybody. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the brightest person in the room, but you can always, what you can control is being the first person in the room and the last person in the room to leave every day and making sure you say yes to everything that's offered. So you can get more responsibility, more projects, which makes yourself more integrated into the culture. So I think those are kind of the key things I always look at, which is, volunteer, networking, and say yes. I think that will continue to be the case. If you saw even today, Jimmy Johnson, who's retired, he even tweeted out right before we started talking today, fully vaccinated. And I think you're going to continue to see that, across all sports, teams, athletes, and others are taking on that responsibility to make others aware that it is safe and is the right thing to do so we can get back to a more regular lifestyle. I think the Boston Red Sox I saw yesterday, they had several players and they were using their social media to share that message out there. And I think you're seeing it from some drivers and you'll continue to see it from drivers and teams and stuff in the future. I'm fully vaccinated and have been for a month or so. And it was an easy process. And, but I tell you, going on the road for the last couple of weeks and coming back home to our family, especially with a son who has a compromised immune system, just made me feel more comfortable to know that, I'm safe if I were to get it. And just because I'm vaccinated doesn't mean I change anything that I'm doing. Still wearing my mask, still keeping my distance, still making all the safe decisions, because even with the vaccine, you can still get it and you can still transmit it. So I always like to say, the vaccine's just going to help keep you alive, that your body be able to fight it if you were to get it. But we're not out of the woods yet, but I do think sports is a really important part in continuing to get people to feel comfortable and safe to be vaccinated. The NASCAR Foundation, it has the Betty Jane France Humanitarian Award that gives out every year, and it recognizes volunteers of organizations across the country. So people volunteer and may, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, the person who won the award was someone who held babies, who were sick babies, and that's what they did. But he had done it for like 30 or 40 years. And so they give back in that way, and then they would donate back to that organization to help fund it and stuff. So they do that. They do Over the Edge, which is where you're walking down along the IMC building, which is down in Daytona. And then they also do what's called Speediatrics events, which are events that tend to be tied, I think, to the Boys and Girls Club, but have all kinds of race car themed STEM events. So you may be racing a tire, but they're teaching you the science of how that tire came together. And we do those around a lot of race weekends across the sport. So we actually had one in Martinsville just a couple of weeks ago. But the NASCAR Foundation's a pivotal part of across all the tracks in NASCAR. And the tracks that NASCAR now owns, when we merged with the International Speedway Corporation, most all of those tracks, Martinsville, Darlington, Richmond, all have their own charitable organizations, but they're all funded through the NASCAR Foundation. So even those individual local charities are still tied back to the NASCAR Foundation. So you've kind of got your broader things that they're trying to do, and then laddering it down to the local level as well. I think when it comes to family and what they teach you is that quality of life is important. I have to have that quality of life, but also when you are home, you have to be present. You have to put the phone down, and you can be dedicated and you can be committed and you can do all those things that are important. But when you do come home, you have to have a safe space that your kids are there. And during the pandemic, especially working from home for months at a time during all this, it's difficult because the kids walk in. But the key part for me, when those things happen, it's not a big deal. I mean, if you know me, you know my parent. I mean, you know my wife, you know my kids. It's just kind of part of the deal. It's a package deal, and I think all the way through is teaching your kids character, and they know that, and you're teaching them that at home, but you're taking that into the workplace as well. That, when you see something, say something, and you're trying to help others, and you're doing that over from race weekends when you're integrated in through all types of people that you may not typically be around, to just the daily home life. So when you get home, I was gone much of the last 2 weeks, but yesterday's flight back, coming back home, it was all planned so I would make sure I was home in time to pick the kids up from school. That had to happen. I had to get up a little earlier. We had to map my day out because that was important, because that's what they asked me. You'll be there to pick us up when you get home, right? And absolutely. And so you were there to pick them up, go grab some ice cream, and then have that time so you can be present. So because the next trip will be coming, and they know it. But I think all those things is just balancing your work life, and it's hard. It's not always easy, especially for those of us who are workaholics, who don't always know how to turn it off. So we don't always make the right decisions on those. But I think being conscious of it and knowing that there are times you need to shut it down and be present at home, and I think that's probably one of the most important things.